Okay, this is going to be the 9-6 number 1 worksheet answer key. All right, so they're asking you to do the quadratic formula. Remember, on the quadratic formula, it must be equal to 0. So you have a 1 in front here, so there's A, B, and C. So x equals the opposite of B. Okay, so it would be a positive 12 plus or minus B squared, so negative 12 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, and C, which is negative 13. All divided by 2 times A, or 2 times 1. Okay, so now go ahead and let's type this into your calculator. So you're going to type this guy in. So I've got negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 13. Okay, and when I do that, I got x equals 12 plus or minus, and I've got the square root of 196 on the inside here, divided by 2. Now I'm going to take the square root of 196, and I end up with 14. So x equals 12 plus or minus 14 divided by 2. Okay, so now we get x equals 12 plus 14, divide it by 2, and x equals 12 minus 14, divide that by 2. Okay, so again, you're just breaking up that positive negative right here in the middle, okay, into 2 problems. So now I'm going to take 12 plus 14, and I get 28, divide it by 2, and I end up with 14. Okay, on this other one here, I'm going to take 12 minus 14 and get negative 2, divide it by 2, and x equals negative 1. Okay, let's go to problem number 2. Again, this is already set equal to 0, so that's good. All right, we've got A is 6, B is 3, and C is negative 30. So x equals the opposite of B, so we'll end up with negative 3 plus or minus the square root of B squared, so I get 3 squared, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A, or 2 times 6, okay? All right, so let's type this in our calculator here. We get 3 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 30. And I got x equals negative 3 plus or minus. I ended up with 729 on the inside here. And divide by 12. All right, so now I'm going to take the square root of 729. And I'm going to end up with x equals negative 3 plus or minus 27 divided by 12. Okay, so now I'm going to break it up into my 2 parts. Negative 3 plus 27, divide that by 12. And I'm going to get negative 3 minus 27 and divide that by 12. Okay, so on this guy here, when I divide, I end up with 24 on top divided by 12. And that ends up giving me a 2 when I divide that. On the second guy here, negative 3 and negative 27 is negative 30. Divide that by 12, and I end up with negative 2.5 when I put that in my calculator. Okay, and those are your solutions for number 2. All right, number 3. Okay, now this guy's not set equal to 0, so we need to go ahead and get him set equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 12 over. So I get 7x squared minus 2x plus 12 equals 0. All right, so I've got A, B, and C. So x equals the opposite of B, so that would be a positive 2, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so negative 2 squared, minus 4. My A value is 7, and my C value is 12. All divided by 2 times A, or 2 times 7. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and type in the negative 2 squared minus 4 times 7 times 12. So I end up with 2 plus or minus the square root, and I get negative 332 over 14. All right, so now keep in mind, put in the calculator if you need to, but when you get a negative number inside of that square root, it's impossible. You will not get an answer, okay? So when you have a negative in there, there are no solutions, okay? And again, just put in your calculator. It'll give you a domain error to let you know something's not quite right. Okay, so this guy, again, is not set equal to 0, so let's go ahead and move that 2 over. So I get 2a squared plus 4a plus 2 equals 0. So x equals negative b, so negative 4, plus or minus 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, and c, which is 2, all divided by 2 times 2. All right, so now I'm going to do 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2, Okay, so again, I'm just doing the inside right here. So I went ahead and just typed this in my calculator. Now, when I type that in my calculator, I end up with a 0. So I've got -4 plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 4. Now, we know that the square root of 0 is just going to be 0. So this is just going to drop off. So what we're left with is just this outside number. All right, so we're going to get x equals -1. All right, and maybe I should have kind of cleared that out. So x equals, we'll get -4 divided by 4, which will give you a -1. Okay. Okay, going to the next page here. Got a word problem. A weekly profit of a company is modeled by the function. The weekly profit is W, is dependent on the number of gizmos G sold. If the break-even point is when W equals 0, how many gizmos must the company sell each week in order to break even? Use the quadratic formula to solve, round to the nearest whole gizmo. So on this, we're going to take, since it says W equals 0, right? If I'm looking at this guy right here, set W equal to 0. So I'm just going to plug W in right there, or plug W0 in right there. So 0 equals -g squared plus 120g minus 28. All right, so now let's go ahead and start that quadratic formula. So I get x equals -120 plus or minus 120 squared minus 4. My a value is -1 and my c value is -28, all divided by 2 times -1. Okay, and I didn't really tell you that back here, but yeah, this right here, right, this would be a, b, and c. All right, so let's type it in the calculator here. So 120 squared minus 4 times -1 times -28. Okay, and I got x equals -120 plus or minus, and then I've got 14,288 divided by -2. Okay, so now let's put that 14,288 in the calculator, and I've got x equals -120 plus or minus. Now in this case, this will be 119.5 divided by -2. All right, so now I need to kind of break up into my two parts. In fact, I'm going to kind of move this way with it just because I ran out of room over there. So my first one here, I've got x equals -120 plus 119.5. I'm going to divide that by 2. Oh, sorry, -2. Okay, and then so let's go ahead and figure that out. So I've got -120 plus 119.5. So I end up with -0.5 divided by -2. And I end up with 0.25. That's not selling very many, is it? Let's try the other one here. So x equals -120 minus the 119.5. And we're going to divide that by -2. Okay? So guys, just keep in mind, I am separating, right? Here's my plus or minus. And I've just separated this out into, oops, wrong one, into this guy and then into this guy. So I'm doing my separation right there. All right, so now let's do -120 minus 119.5. Okay, and when I do that, I end up with -239.5 divided by -2. And I end up with 119.75. Okay, so now I'm looking at my two answers here. So what's happened here is it's asking us for a break-even point. And in business, break-even just simply means when are you not going to lose any money? When do you sell enough items to not lose any money? You won't make money, but you won't lose money. So looking at your two answers here, well, when I round this off to the nearest whole, this would be actually rounded off to 0. Well, 0 makes sense. If you make nothing and you sell nothing, then you lose nothing. Okay, on this guy, I would need to round this up to 120. And so this would be my break-even point. I could sell 120 gizmos and not make money, but not lose any money. So right here, this guy's going to round up to 120 gizmos is what I would need to sell to break even. Okay. All right, and number 6, this is just a review from the last section. So we're still going to go ahead and set equal to 0. So I'm going to bring that 6 in right over here. So I'm going to subtract it off and stick it there in the middle. So I've got n squared minus 6n plus 8 equals 0. So now I'm looking for factors of 8 that get us -6. So I'm thinking 2 and 4, and then I think that they both would need to be negative. So negative 2 times negative 4 is 8, but when I add them, I get negative 6. So I'm going to get n minus 2 and n minus 4 equals 0. Now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to get n equals 2 and n equals 4. Okay. All right, on the next guy here, again, we're going to set equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that 8 over right to here. So I'm going to get 3r squared minus 5r minus 8 equals 0. I've got 1 times 3, 1 times 8, and 2 times 4. Okay, so now if I'm doing my inside outside, if I look here, 1 times 8 is 8, 3 times 1 is 3, and if I make this negative, that gets me negative 5. So I have a 1-3 combo, 1r, and 3r in front. On the back side, I have a 1, 8, 1, 8. And then keep in mind, I want this 8 to be negative, so I'm putting the negative there, which means this will be my positive. So I have got r plus 1 equal to 0, and 3r minus 8 equal to 0. So r equals negative 1. This one I'm going to add the 8 over, and then divide and get r equals 8/3. Okay. On number 8, okay, this guy is already set equal to 0, so that's good. Remember GCF, I'll always pull GCF first, so in this case I'm going to plot an x and have x plus 7 left over. So now x will equal 0, and x plus 7 will equal 0. Now this guy's already done, and on this guy I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 7 over and get x equals negative 7. Okay, oops, and on the last one here, this is already set equal to 0. Now this is a difference of squares. I can square root, I have subtraction, I can square root, and there is no GCF. All right, so I'm going to square root of 25 is 5. I got a plus minus in the middle, and the square root of 49 is 7. So I've got 5x plus 7 equal to 0, and 5x minus 7 equal to 0. So 5x equals negative 7, so x equals negative 7/5. 5x equals positive 7, so x equals positive 7/5. And those are your two solutions. Okay, that concludes this answer key.